Good morning, everyone. I hope you are doing okay, and thank you for joining us today to this webinar on the IRAP new survey data from Haiti. And where we will be discussing the early public findings on security and justice and governance. So my name is Ralph Valerie Valia. I will be moderating this session today. Again, it's going to be a productive conversation. Before we begin, I also want to briefly introduce Haiti Policy House, the organization that is hosting this webinar. So Haiti Policy House is a Haitian-led policy research institute based in Washington, D.C. So the organization focuses on producing rigorous, accessible analysis on Haiti's political, security, economic, and foreign policy dynamics, but with a particular attention to how international decisions affect Haitians on the ground and in the diaspora. Haiti Policy House engages, policymakers, researchers, civil society, and diaspora community through different methods like policy briefs, public discussions, or maybe closed door briefings also. And the goal is to move conversation about Haiti beyond crisis-driven narrative toward a more informed, strategic, and evidence-based policymaking. So, um, today's discussion is also part of the Haiti Policy House mission, and it's about creating space for data, for expertise, for serious dialogues on issues that matter for Haiti, and also for international stakeholders. So yes. So this is a summary of what we're doing. And once again, thank you for being with us today. And I'm pleased to move us into today's conversation. Um Again, what today we're gonna talk about something that is very interesting. We will talk about the IRAP new survey data from Haiti. And this new survey data is part of one of the phase of the Advancing Peace Building in Haiti for Improving Policy Debate regarding Transitional Justice Opportunity and Challenges initiative that is being implemented by HIRAP itself. So the goal of this initiative is to contribute to a broader consensus regarding all the possibilities, all the options for public policy and civic action related to security, justice, and reconciliation in Haiti. And the initiative is trying to do this by improving the quality of the public and political conversation related to those issues. And the method that they're using is usually deliberative approaches to better name and frame the choices facing the Asian population, and including also its organized civil society, Asian duty bearers, and policymakers. And to some extent, also the international community that is engaged in Haiti, and also that are working with different stakeholders in Haiti. Again, this is this is part of the first phase, and then we are very happy to um to have this discussion today. So I'm gonna call Louis-Henri to introduce himself and talk a bit about IRAP, and then after this, Laurie Richardson, which is our second speaker today, will be introducing herself. So, Louis-Marie, you have the mic. Can you please introduce yourself and talk a bit about your background, but also about what we're gonna do today, and then IRAP in general. Louis-Henri, sorry.
Thank you, Ralph. Thank you for introducing this moment that we're spending together. Thank you to Haiti Policy House for giving us the opportunity to present these findings to this distinguished public. As Ralph said, I'm Louis-Henri. For 20 years, I was in the private sector in Haiti. I'm still in certain ways in there, in the real estate business. But before that, I was in the assembly industry and also in local businesses, owning, managing businesses, and losing businesses also to embargoes, to street violence, barricades, and tire burning. And got interested back around 2007 in why these things were happening in Haiti, and I got involved more and more in trying to build peace and transform conflict. I participated in the Grand Prix Center for Peace and Reconciliation and Concern project around peace building in Haiti from 2005, 2007, 2012. And after 2012, I was a co-founder of a peace building organization called La Paix. Then I became the executive director of La Paix until October of last year. During that period, I engaged in building different relationships and trying to move the needle in terms of conflict in Haiti and focusing on building relationships and through the whole social pyramid. And it's been a extraordinary adventure. Has I've had the opportunity to work with all sectors of society, including the armed sectors, the gangs, and the private sector and the political sector, and trying to link up all of these sectors together so as to develop connections between all of these uh, sectors in Haiti. I'm with my colleague Laurie Richardson that we've been working since 2007 together, and I'm gonna give her the opportunity to introduce herself. Laurie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and thanks very much to Haiti Policy House for hosting this webinar. It's a great space because the mission of Haiti Policy House really aligns with what we're about: evidence-based work and really better naming and framing the issues so that everyone can engage in a productive way. I've been engaged with Haiti for over 30 years across the humanitarian development and peace building spectrum. 20 years of that time I've spent in Haiti, so have a ground view of all of the capacities and the amazing work that's being done here, as well as the challenges related to fragile state in Haiti and social degradation and deterioration as a result of all of these stresses on the population. So I've worked at many levels. I've had the opportunity to work with popular organizations, grassroots organizations, national NGOs, and also international NGOs. So that's given a good vantage point of how different people are seeing it at different levels. In 2006, I had the privilege of being involved in introducing, piloting dialogue-based, multi-sector, multi-track peace building in Haiti with the support of experts from Ireland, the Glencree Center for Peace and Reconciliation, as Louis-Henri has mentioned, and through the international NGO Concern Worldwide. We did very important work, both at community levels and to engage individuals outside of communities who were affected by violence and who were affecting violence. And it was an inclusive process. It's done a lot. This has been work done in Lower Delma, across Martissant, in many of the conflict-affected neighborhoods in the Metro Port-au-Prince area. And despite the constraints that are real, the lack of continuous funding, the difficulties in dealing with funding cycles and coming to scale to really have the impact. There's been important learning that's happened, and there have been important local institutions that have spun off of that work, including IRAP, which Louis-Henri is going to present more, which is a community of practice, frontline peace builders working in the neighborhoods and also working to connect those in the neighborhoods with others so that they can have a stake in one another for peace.
Thank you, Laurie. Could you please put up the PowerPoint? In 2012, as we were continuing the work started by Grand Prix and Concern, and we established La Paix very early, we understood that it was important that the facilitators that were opening up the space and getting trained in conflict transformation and peace building and dialogue processes be available not only for La Culape, but also for other organizations and sectors of Haitian society who needed to learn and develop uh, dialogue processes. And so we participated and encouraged the creation of the Institut de Recherche et d'Action pour la Paix, which is loosely translated Institute for Research and Action for Peace, which is made up of the peace building practitioners and facilitators that were being developed and trained. And the idea was, again, to support the prevention, management, and nonviolent transformation of conflict in Haiti. And so we encourage them to be available to work not only with La Culape, but with Concern. And they did that with PRDF, Viva Rio, and others, so that there is a more of a movement that is very large and not just coming out of the La Culape process. So they've been offering training, conceptualization and facilitation of dialogues, mediation and collaborative action processes, and other services. The great advantage that they have is that they're anchored in not only the grassroots communities, but in all sectors of Haitian society, because we've learned very early through our experience with Glen Cree and Concern, and also through actual physical experience with the process, that we had to involve all of the social pyramid, not just work at the community level, but be able to access the tip of the pyramid, the privates in the political sector, the private sector, and civil society. So therefore, IRAP is made up of facilitators from these different sectors. And the initiative that we're going to be looking at today, the idea was to hear the different representatives of members of different sectors of Haitian society and see what they are really thinking. There's a lot of people who talk for the people. They think that that's what the people want, but it's very rare to actually be able to understand and listen to what people actually think. So the idea was to contribute to a broader consensus around options for public policies and civic actions in Haiti to advance security, justice, and reconciliation, eventual reconciliation in Haiti. So it's two phases, and we're going to be looking at phase one today. And the phase one was consultations around the issue of justice and security with violence-affected populations across the social spectrum, about their attitudes and recommendations regarding current security and justice challenges. And they're living through those things right now, and so it's live considerations. Phase two is going to be, we've already started actually phase two. We're in the process of doing that, is to refine and deepen the data that has been gathered from phase one and articulate it in some public policy options to be offered to society and anybody who's in positions of power nationally and internationally, and try to make sure that whoever is in a position to influence things in Haiti, there are options and they can see what to choose between the different trade-offs and advantages and disadvantages in what is necessary from the point of view of the communities. Phase three, of course, is going to be the dissemination of those deliberations and try to develop public and political debates surrounding these opportunities. what's going to be important in the situation that we're living now is that this is a large process, and whoever is in power, come in power to power in coming days and months, that they are imbued with what these results are and these opportunities and recommendations are. So I'm going to pass this on to Laurie, who is the technical coordinator who actually went out and worked with IRAP to deliver this important work. Laurie, thank you very much.
Yeah. So this is a pretty respectable number of people consulted, 523 Haitians. The time that we consulted them was from mid-October to early December. So we will be mentioning in a few places where we think things have evolved since. But these are highly violence-affected individuals. We did this through a survey of 250 internally displaced persons living in different camps across the Metro Port-au-Prince area. We did a survey of 87 members of peace and dialogue committees that we had established through earlier work. These are community leaders from different sectors within the communities of Saint-Martin and Lower Delma and Fort National. And so they have been trained in peace building and more conflict sensitivity and have engaged in their communities to do actions around peace building. So we surveyed 87 of them. We had 16 focus groups in 8 different communities, again, ranging from Carrefour to Martissan, La Saline, Lower Delma, Pétionville, Canapé Vert, a range of different neighborhoods. Many of them with presence of armed gangs within them. And we also had 6 sectoral focus groups, the political sector, the economic sector, human rights and justice, media and higher education, socio-professionals, and people from the cultural and religious sector. As I said, this is a highly violence-affected population that needs to be taken into an account when we look at the results of what people said. Of course, those who are displaced and living in camps have faced serious traumas. They've lost significant assets. They're displaced from their homes. They've separated from their families. 3/4 of them are affected by violence related to gangs. That means violence from gangs or against gangs. Over once a week or on a daily or almost daily basis. Peace and Dialogue Committee members, many of them are also displaced, living with family members or living in camps. And 2/3 of them were stated that they were affected by this gang-related violence, again, either daily or almost daily or over once a week. Many of them have lost assets, economic opportunities. People are suffering from very high levels of stress. 58% of the displaced population express this as a key impact, and 66% of those from the Peace and Dialogue Committees express that. Those from the sectoral, who gathered together in sectoral sections, also, while we didn't quantify it in the same way, they cited the similar impacts, again, loss of loved ones, loss of assets, displacement, separation from loved ones, a lot of psychological trauma. And even those who are armed actors, because we had a focus group with 8 members at the lieutenant level, the sub leader level, members of a gang in Lower Delma, and also vigilante brigades. And these individuals are also highly affected by violence. Perhaps it goes without saying, but we must keep it in mind that they feel trapped in a cycle of violence. Many of them are expressing shame for their involvement in this, and they feel that they don't know how to get out. So these are preliminary findings, as we said. This was from the first phase, again, collected at the end of last year. And one of the things that we wanted to start with is looking at why Haiti is stuck at the peak of the violence curve, at this mutually hurting stalemate, despite so many resources and so many attempts and a lot of verbal commitment to changing things in Haiti. Why is Haiti stuck? We asked people what they felt the key obstacles were, and these are among some of the key obstacles. We tried to get folks to focus on the most proximate, and we know sometimes that immediate obstacles are linked with obviously underlining root causes. But when we asked people to drive toward what were some short-term, what are some of the obstacles that if you address them in the short term, you could have perhaps some breakthrough. These are among the things that were identified, that easy access to weapons and ammunition. The fact that public security operations, though they were happening at the time when we consulted people, people considered that strategy was very weak, that there was not enough coordination among the different actors, that there was political interference that was not allowing for these operations to really be effective, that there were leaks that allowed gang leaders to escape at the last minute from police operations, and that there was a significant amount of abuse and collateral damage that was driving a wedge between the population and the police and other security operators. Crisis of leadership, we see it on display today, painfully so, as we're moving toward February 7th, and this affects everything. It's a cross-cutting issue. Haiti needs a unifying leadership to rally people behind solutions that they can trust and feel confident in. Political and economic interests, of course, this is underlying cause, but it also has daily proximate effect on the level of violence, because illicit activities they are throughout the Haitian economy, and people are depending on them, many people, even at the community level, for an income on a day-to-day basis. Also, we felt it was important, people mentioned through the comments made and the analysis that we had, it became clear to us that there are some key tools that could support breakthroughs that were not really being considered in the toolkit to reduce violence. That there was a widespread perception of dialogue as being taboo, dialogue with armed actors, that it was unfeasible. Also, that the sense that transitional justice issues were not being anticipated effectively, that demobilization mechanisms for getting voluntary exit from armed structures were not clear. The CNDDR, the National Commission for Disarmament, Demobilization, and Reintegration, was not functioning. And so it leaves violence and vigilante justice as the only option if it's not clear how practically one gets out of it. Also, we felt that there was, and people mentioned that there's a lot of confusion around what people are willing to accept, not enough conversation that really is bringing the conversation forward. So we consulted around three main themes, two of them primary, one of them a little bit more opportunistic. And the first main theme was violence, how to reduce the violence. What is the strategy? And again, these are difficult issues, thorny issues. Is it about using more force, more effectively, more volume of force? What about pursuing dialogue, opening channels for dialogue, or possibly both? When we asked people to consider three approaches, and what you're seeing in the charts again is the different colors of different members of the population. The IDPs are green, the yellow are the Peace and Dialogue Committee members, and the blue are neighborhood residents. We did not quantify for sectoral focus groups, but the text boxes, that you can go back to this afterwards. I won't be touching obviously on all the text, but the rich data in the text boxes includes reflections from sector group participants about why they believe certain things. So when people were asked to consider those three approaches, most are preferring more robust security operations. However, we found that over half expressed some interest in opening channels for dialogue with armed actors. That includes 28.6% who expressed openness to that, or even said that that should be a priority for the coming months, because that's the way the question was asked. And when people said both, if you take open channels of dialogue and you include those who believe that both of these strategies should be included, that means over half are open to it. Of course, clearly the main finding is most really wanted more robust security operations. And why? It's pretty obvious. They felt the need to shift the balance of power, to really put the gangs on the back foot, and to dissuade additional people from joining. and to also bring them to the negotiating table, those who felt both strategies were needed, that they felt that it was necessary to have the stick as well as a possible carrot. Mistrust also, this is throughout, those who didn't feel negotiations were going to be helpful. It's because they either mistrust the government to engage in negotiations or mistrust the gangs, or both. So even those who wanted more robust force, however, they did have concerns about certain practices, summary executions, collateral damage, and concerns about how vigilante brigades are behaving. Some of them are risking turning into gangs themselves. Those who believed that dialogue should be prioritized, or should be one of the priorities for going forward, basically they felt it's going to be unavoidable that security approaches alone, given certain weaknesses and some corruption in there, would require opening channels for dialogue, that it could also be an accelerator alongside more robust force, and to gather intelligence about upper level actors beyond the gangs, because we know that it's not just about those who are perpetrating directly violence in the country, but it's about those who are financing them, those who are supporting them, and that a dialogue can help identify who those individuals are to get upstream. Concerns about dialogue included, what are the optics of that? Can these people be trusted? Can you dialogue with people you don't trust? Those in peace building circles would say, yeah, you have to. That's exactly the kind of people you got to dialogue with, actually. But this is what people said. And then transparency. How would dialogue happen? What does the public need to know, and what would be kept from the public? We also asked people to consider dialogue more directly, and just asking them, what is your attitude toward dialogue as one tool in a toolkit, in a broader toolkit? The responses are similar. Again, almost half are opposing, either totally or mostly. At the same time, about 36% favorable, either totally or mostly, to the idea of opening channels for dialogue. Again, I've already pretty much discussed the reasons behind those different positions. They're not so much different. It was mentioned also that in terms of opposition to dialogue, is a sense that you cannot dialogue from a point of weakness, that you must have more of a better position from which to dialogue. And at the time when this data was collected, things were not looking exactly as they're looking today. One important finding here when we asked about this particular piece is that people felt that civil society should have a role in the dialogue process, and that in fact maybe it should be civil society dialoguing with armed groups as opposed to the government. So now, with a shifting balance of power, with recent security operations, it may be that dialogue, even more people believe that it might be appropriate to introduce it as a tool. Attitudes about the gang suppression force. In the international community, this is, a lot of people are betting on the GSF. And traditionally, or at the time, there was quite a lot of skepticism from the Haitian public about it, based on earlier experiences with peacekeeping forces, in terms of the sustainability of any impact, and also concerns. There had been human rights abuses. There had been the introduction of cholera. So there's not very positive memories about that. And so what we found in our findings, where most people did not believe that there was going to be any positive impact, 23%, 27% felt no impact whatsoever, 23% a negative impact, 13% mitigated or mixed. Only 16% were projecting positive impact, 21% being undecided. And among the positive impacts that people cited, strengthening of the local security apparatus. The negative, the collateral damage, the possibility of introduction of illness, unwanted pregnancies, etc. Sovereignty obviously affects attitudes related to the GSF, sovereignty concerns. At the same time, many Haitians have also expressed, those that we consulted, a number of them expressed the fact that with gangs controlling huge amounts of territory, the question of sovereignty is a bit of a canard. In terms of collateral damage, when we spoke to people, there was a low tolerance for collateral damage, particularly given the limited results of the security operations. The way the question was asked was not just what you see on screen there, how bothered are you when operations against armed groups injure or kill innocent people, but in framing the possible responses, not at all too extremely, it was framed in ways, we couldn't fit it on the slide here, but asking, in relation to results that security operations would bring. So those with the greater tolerance for collateral damage just believe that it's inevitable. You have to push with security operations. They have to be maintained and intensified, and residents will just have to find ways to relocate or take cover. Just a hard look at what needs to happen. Those with lower tolerance for collateral damage, again, they said, well, it is, the problem is that these operations are not bringing the results, and therefore we're left with the collateral damage without the results. And because of complicity of HNP agents or other reasons, lack of appropriate planning and execution of the operations. And also, there are many residents of gang-controlled neighborhoods that feared for their own safety and that believe that the messages and the actions of the security forces showed that they're considered themselves as legitimate targets by the virtue of their proximity to gangs. And recent statements by the chief of police in Haiti have really sent mixed messages. This past week or in the last 10 days, the chief of police had a press conference, and among the things that he discussed were how going into the neighborhoods, there essentially, he said, there will be collateral damage, and residents must get out. But he said things that it's challenging to do that. But he also said, well, tell me where you are and who you associate with, or who you're close to physically, and I'll tell you who you are. He said, you're adults, you're all vaccinated, you know what you need to do, kind of thing. So I think that there are mixed messages being sent, and that one of the things that we felt was important to highlight was the fear on the part of those who are in gang-controlled neighborhoods, who, in the context of high levels of vigilante justice, find it difficult to just leave their neighborhoods and go to other neighborhoods when they have IDs that are showing them as having lived in those areas. They feel doubly victimized by living in those areas where gangs are predatory toward the local population, and from security forces and from vigilante groups. So we asked also about confidence building measures. What might it look like if there was a need to and a desire to open up channels for dialogue between the government and armed groups? What would need to happen to make that happen? And here on the slides, you can see that there are a number of actions that people suggested, and that are actually, it's a very rich menu that's entirely possible, that these things can happen. And what takes for that to happen is for people to believe that this could be helpful to do this, that people could start to have the courage to take steps toward this if it's posited. So on the suggested for and by members of the armed gangs, we say by because those that you see in blue were also listed by gang members that we consulted as possible things that they could do to show the population that change is possible, and that they are looking to change their ways and get out of this cycle of violence. So for both sides, of course, a ceasefire could be an initial step, dialing back the level of the level of gunfire going on. And also, then beyond that, changing their behavior at for gangs, stopping their other violent activities, allowing for freedom of movement, because that's one big issue. A lot of tolls, a lot of barricades up, cooperating eventually in dismantling the system of violence by providing intelligence, providing information. Also stopping recruitment, these things that stopping social media posts that are recruiting new members, facilitating the release of minors that are engaged currently within the gangs, and also launching initiatives that show that reparations could happen, beginning to repair some of the infrastructure that they've destroyed. On the side of the Haitian government, it would take preparing for dialogue, and serious preparations would be needed, and also preparing concrete DDR mechanisms. Right now, again, without a national commission for DDR, it's unclear what the process would be for those gang members who would like to exit. And the chief of police in his press conference of the last week or so suggested people could just turn themselves into churches, could go to radio stations, et cetera. I'm not sure how much confidence that will inspire. I think the question of more structured approaches, more clear package for what it would look like. And again, these things that you're seeing here, I'm speaking myself now, sometimes putting in a first person spin on this, but these are things that the people that we consulted, these are the ideas that came from them. Also for the government, being ready, the last point, number 4 there for them, is being ready to go into neighborhoods to have a positive presence, because that is one of the problems that led us to where we are in the first place, that services and investments were not going into marginalized neighborhoods, and it led to gangs to be able to posit themselves as Robin Hood before the population. The vigilante brigade leaders that we spoke to also recognize that they'll need to demobilize as well, and they had a number of points that they suggested that they could do, as in terms of preparation for peace. Isabelle Clarier, an expert on transitional justice and restorative justice, has used that term, preparation for peace. There's a big preparation that has to happen here, and for them, would involve things like dismantling their barricades, beginning to surrender some of their weapons, and even turning over some of their members who have committed crimes. In terms of the second big topic that we covered, approaches to justice and eventual social reconciliation. What are, again, no easy answers here, but we wanted to ask people what they were thinking about different approaches, and we asked them roughly, again, it was asking them about 2 approaches or combining those 2 approaches. So we asked them which of these approaches to justice would be most effective in the Haitian context to addressing violence of the past 5 years while preventing future violence. And the choices were punitive justice, i.e. going through tribunals using the court-based system for the state to take the main role to bring people before a court of law, to judge them, try them, and to hold them in prison for those who are convicted. Restorative justice, we defined that as more of a community-based process, where it would be more a dialogue-based process, where those who are victims or survivors would have some interaction with, or be hearing from, those who had created the harm, who were engaged in the criminal actions, in violent actions. Those who were engaged in that would take responsibility for their actions and would make some attempt at repairing, moral reparation or some other kind of reparation to be defined. That's how we spoke about restorative justice. And the truth-telling was a part of that as well, or both. So when we ask people about those 3 approaches, for the plurality, for more than the plurality, let's say, justice is punitive justice. It's about punishment. And it's about punishment to set an example, to show that the rule of law is returning to Haiti. The crimes have been so extreme. They have been so widespread these people just need to be hauled up and punished. And even the death penalty. Many people are calling for death penalty in Haiti. And they also believe that conviction could support closure for those who have suffered these wrongs. Those who believed in, so 42% were feeling, punitive justice all the way. If we look at both and we add both to that, then that's where we'd be up more at 42 plus 31, over 75% or 73%, believing that punitive justice is an important strategy in justice. For restorative justice, almost 20% felt like that was really the priority. If we look at now, using both, then we're about at the 50% mark. And why did people believe restorative approaches would be important? Because they felt that it would give a better chance or a good chance for peaceful outcomes, because it's a victim-centered approach, but it also facilitates reinsertion of offenders because they will take responsibility and seek to repair harms done. They also felt like it might help to address certain needs at scale, including the need to really, many minors in these groups and lower level offenders will need to, they can't just be kept in a prison. Well, minors will not go to prison according to the current laws in Haiti. They're not considered to be in conflict with the law. They're exploited by groups, armed groups. They need to be brought back into society, reoriented and broadened, and that restorative approaches are what's needed for that. And also dealing with massive trauma, and that this could help to do so. So we have most people here who are, those are the reasons they're giving, and also because they don't believe that the main justice system will be able to do that. Cross-cutting challenges here, documenting of cases, how will these cases be documented, and what will reparations look like? I've got to accelerate a little bit because we've got more data to present and to allow time for questions as well. So while many people, if we go here, we're saying, 42% definitely want to see punitive justice as the main priority, and almost over 70% see that it's important to be in there, and yet half doubt that the justice system can provide that punitive justice for reasons that many of us are all well aware of. A lot of corruption, political interference, just a lack of resources, infrastructure. Courts have been destroyed. Prisons are not standing or are ineffective and are inhumane. Police stations have been destroyed. So arrest capacity, the capacity for judges, all of that is very weak within the current system. Case documentation will be very difficult. So why did some people, so the vast majority are saying, no, this won't be possible, or half, 48%. Another, if you add external support, another 12% think maybe that could happen. 12% are also saying, well, it depends upon who you are. If you're well connected, the justice system will never convict you. So there's a lot of doubt about what the Haitian justice system could actually deliver. And so therefore people suggested possibly special tribunals or extradition could be something to introduce. And in fact, we'll be exploring those two things more in the second phase. Okay, somehow I'm not. Okay, there we go. In terms of the feasibility for restorative justice, there was greater confidence in that. 41% felt that this could happen, that there was confidence there. However, there were still concerns, and a significant minority, 32%, felt that there was not capacity there. Part of it is about lack of experience in Haiti, and also whether civil society that would be playing a role in that, are they not too politicized, or have they not become themselves entangled with gangs? There's too much of the tentacles spread out throughout society to be able to have this to work. And yet still a sense that this is an important tool in the toolkit, and it needs to be prepared. And that truth-telling, a truth commission, would be also part of this, but that there needs to be broad public education around restorative justice for this to be brought into practice. Most opposed any reduced sentences in exchange for cooperation and truth, 60%. Also, part of that may have been the way we asked it. We asked about offering amnesty or reduced sentence. And so we have 60% opposed totally or somewhat, 15% undecided, 25% favorable totally or somewhat. For opposed, we know the reasons why, risk of impunity, etc., needing to set examples. But also those who are more favorable felt we are exhausted and we need to find incentives for them to demobilize, and we need the information they can provide in order to get upstream and to get at those who are behind the violence. A big red flag when we ask people about future reconciliation, many believing that it's just, we're going to have to live in the same country, but reconciliation, just can't imagine what that looks like. And this is a very red flag for going forward, because if there isn't more social reconciliation and a way for people to lay down their burdens, it's a harbinger of ongoing instability, cycles of vengeance, violence. Those who have, even if someone were tried, spent time in prison, let's say, that example happened, when they get out, will they be accepted in society to find a job, to find a legal livelihood? All of this requires a lot of conversation and hard thinking and more awareness raising around what real options are. We asked people to talk about what reconciliation would look like, what the preconditions were. Again, just quickly saying that it's pretty much transitional justice. I won't stay on this slide. The last thing that we asked people about was a bit opportunistic. We asked them about elections and governance, just 2 questions. And again, it wasn't all groups. We did not ask this in the sectoral groups at all. We had no time. We needed to go into more detail on the other issues with them. In terms of elections, majority agreed, again, this is back in October or November, agreed that elections needed to be postponed due to the insecurity. Just the security context doesn't allow for campaigning in occupied zones in particular, that the material conditions also, things like having voter IDs, having voter stations, voter bureaus, that there just wasn't possible to do that in the current context. Credibility, if we don't have good turnout, we don't have decent elections, this will only prolong instability in Haiti. So while 58% agreed it's important to postpone the elections, 12% were undecided, 32% still said elections. It's a message that people were sending that we really need to move toward elected government, because we cannot hold unelected government accountable in the same way, and postponing only increases more uncertainty. We asked people about, once February 7th, that given that the Transitional Presidential Council's mandate was up on 7th of February, what kind of arrangement should happen after that? And here again, we only asked 2 different groups this. The neighborhood groups were fatigued at this point in time in the focus groups, so we could not collect this data from them. But in terms of the survey of those in displaced persons camps and members of Peace and Dialogue Committee members, we have only, I think the big main finding here, only 5% would have extended the mandate of the Transitional Presidential Council. Still, despite the security issues, the same number, about a third, that back here also that were saying no, we shouldn't postpone, about a third, and here a third again wanting to send a message we need to move to elected government. About 30% said there should be a transitional government led by a Supreme Court justice, and 25% another kind of transitional government. So it's a lot of data. Just the last thing I'll say here is that there are actionable points to be drawn out of this. And key things is the population is really exhausted and really needs release from this. Citizens really want to see gangs dismantled. They believe that both security operations and dialogue can play a role in that. They want those responsible to be punished, even those who are beyond the direct perpetrators, those who are financing it, yet they don't trust the justice system to do it. So they believe also that lower level actors, especially many, many minors that are engaged in armed groups right now, that they must be reintegrated into society, and that restorative justice approaches can play an important role in that. In relation to elections, as we said, that yes, pushing back for now, but that there needs to be a process to move things forward. And that involves also more robust security operations and possibly dialogue to deal with the security side of that equation. So I'll stop there for now, and thank you.
All right, thank you, and thank you so much, Laurie, for this wonderful, productive, presentation. So, the next thing we're going to do now. So, I'm just gonna. I mean, I had like so many questions, but if we start having this conversation right now, I think we won't have time to give the audience a chance to ask questions. So, I'm just gonna ask you one specific question, and then we're going to move to the questions from the audience. And also, this is a time also to remind everybody who's attending that you can use the Q&A box to ask questions. And we'll go over those questions. And as long as the time allows us to do it, we will have those answered live. But for some questions, maybe if you want to reach out to Laurie and maybe Louis-Henri a second later, that's a possibility. Regarding the presentation also, I think I've seen a couple of people asking this. This presentation will be available to be downloaded after, and then also this webinar is recorded, so you can download everything if you want to review all the information that has been provided so far. So the first question that I have, Laurie and Louis-Henri, is that for many people, dialogue with armed groups is morally unacceptable. Again, the study also shows that about 46% of the respondents are opposed to this strategy. But for others, it's unavoidable given the weakness of the state and the population exhaustion. Let's keep in mind that 36% of the respondents are favorable to such dialogue. So where should ethical red lines be drawn? Who can be engaged on what issue and with what safeguards in this process?
Thank you, Ralph. I think that the major issue is the question of impunity. The population does not want to see people who have killed, raped, murdered, and burned escape with impunity. And not only them, but those who have provided them the arms, the ammunition, those who have backed them up politically, and encourage this thing to go on for the times it's been happening. So I think that the main question is how to do both, transform the military situation in favor of the state, but at the same time understand that going all out and trying to kill everybody is not going to work, because there's just it's a too big of a problem, and it's not only about banditry. It's also a social issue. So if there's not a holistic approach to it, it's just not going to work. That's I think is the main question. I don't know if Laurie wants to add anything.
I would just add that, again, I think there's more public awareness to be done around this, and deliberation, because the question is always, what's the alternative? And that's the deliberative thinking. The deliberative thinking is to dig deeper into what the trade-offs are different positions rather than just the initial reflex about something. And in terms of dialogue, the question is, what is the alternative to no dialogue? What could be the advantages of dialogue? And yes, you talk about what the red lines are there. I think that there is a question of how dialogue can't just take place in the public square. There does need to be a moving toward and starting in back channels, and then developing an agenda for dialogue that leads to proposals about what can happen. But if you don't discuss, let's talk about elections coming up. If there's not discussion with the groups that are currently they're now on the back foot, let's say, with more robust security operations. We don't know how long that will be sustained, where this goes to. But if you don't know what their end game is, or what their political ambitions are, what their political demands might be, are there political demands, or is this just about drug trafficking? Is it just about illicit economic activities? Who is behind them that might be connected to political sectors? Finding that out is key toward stability going forward in Haiti. And as a peace building tool, it's very important to discuss and to dialogue with the people you got problems with. Those are the people you need to be speaking with most.
Good, thank you. Excellent. So let me move to the second question that I have before we start answering the questions from the audience. So you have presented many obstacles so far in this presentation, and among the main obstacles identified, we have arms trafficking. We have ineffective security and justice institutions. We have leadership crisis, entrenched political and economic interest, and also we have the lack of public deliberation, as you suggested in the answer that you just provided. So, if we had to pick 3 of those factors, which one should be addressed first to achieve a meaningful reduction in violence in the short term, and why?
I don't think that you can say you start here with number one, and then you do number two, and then you do number three. It has to be, again, a holistic approach. If you don't stem the flow of arms and ammunition into the country, what is the incentive for these guys to stop? Uh, you do have to stem this flow here in Haiti, not just at the exit port, but at the entry port. And yeah, there has to be a very big push for that. Now, if you don't address from now on the issue of opportunities for the youth, a lot of the youth that are in those gangs are doing jobs. They're working guys. Okay, and the gangs have a list of people waiting for jobs. Okay, so if you're not already now preparing, what are they gonna do once they are demobilized? You're not really doing much of anything. So it has to be a very holistic approach to all of that.
Yeah, we felt like the list there of this, early in the slides, the list of those proximate obstacles, that it is possible to take on more than one of those at once. Part of it, the sequencing is really focusing first on bringing that violence down, more cutting off the flow of guns and ammunitions. There's already been more progress on that. Security operations, there's been more coordinated, more equipment, more boots on the ground. There's been a better approach, even though there still is collateral damage. But what we're hearing from the neighborhoods is that despite that collateral damage, population, even in those zones, they are supporting these robust security operations. They want to see them come and bring about breaking down the structure of the gangs. But that doesn't mean that the gang members are gone. So there also needs to be preparation for peace. And those things, you can't just do it from one day to the next. So you must now begin to talk about what are the key exit ramps and the reinsertion strategies for many people in communities that need to be brought out of violence, reoriented, and brought back into the community. So it does require a multifaceted approach. And for the state, very important to be ready to go into the communities. It's not just about stopping the control of gangs in those communities and their outward aggressive actions. It's about addressing the things that cause this in the first place, which includes the fact that those communities are lacking basic services and are highly discriminated against.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Laurie. So if I'm correct, you're currently in Haiti, right, Laurie?
Yes,
Right.
Laura Prince.
So we're gonna move on to the next phase, which is taking questions from the audience. We have a couple of questions that seem very interesting so far. So I'm gonna read them out for you, and maybe you have access to them, but I'm gonna read them out anyway, so everybody can see them. The first question is asked by Jacqueline Charles. Um, the question is like more robust security operation, but at the same time we are hearing concern about civilian casualties. So how do we reconcile those two? And there's a second part of this question, but I'm gonna let you like answer the first part first.
Yeah, well, I just mentioned, and I think what I just said sort of speaks a bit to Jackie's question. It is the responsibility of security forces to protect civilians. And I'm sure it's very difficult, but it's necessary. And the messages have to be clear, and there have to be clear humanitarian corridors. There needs to be, where there are examples of abuse, of going into a home and just gunning down everybody in that home. It doesn't matter that there's a radio communication or a phone with a communication with a gang there. It doesn't mean that you're killing a 13-year-old, an elderly woman in there and all that. Those things must be cracked down upon. And because it only creates more problems down the road. However, yes, there may be some collateral damage from the use of drones or from people being caught in the crossfire. One has to try to minimize that. And currently, again, if the civilian population in seeing now a more sustained, robust, more effective security operations that can actually can start to begin to dismantle the structures of those armed civilian groups, then there's more tolerance for what people would not like to see, but understand may happen in terms of civilian casualties.
Yeah, I think also the intervening state actors, PNH and auxiliaries, have to have the conscience that they have to limit civilian casualties. If the death of uninvolved men, women, and children is just collateral damage, and then they brush it off, there will not be a real attempt to mitigate that kind of effect of their interventions.
Mhm.
So there has to be a conscious awareness and desire from the part of the state, to mitigate as much as possible that those kind of effects.
That's good. So as I mentioned earlier, there's a second part to this question, and the second part of Jacqueline's question is also there seems to be different definitions of negotiations. And so, how is the population defining this concept specifically? And w- what do you define as dialogue, and what are the red lines? I mean, it's kind of like connected to the first question that I asked, but it's good like to at least to give a review of this again.
Well, in terms of how we ask the question, I would say the question was asked in a pretty straight ahead manner. It was, what is the role for dialogue? And sometimes it was dialogue or negotiations between the government and armed civilian groups or gangs. And so we did not define beyond that for the data that we have. It was left at that. And I think from my experience here in the work that we've done over the past 20 years, people are seeing that to be about opening lines of conversation, whatever that looks like. It's true that just to try and kind of maybe dig to the essence of this, it's that there were concerns expressed about legitimacy of government. So can this government legitimately speak and negotiate or dialogue with gangs in our name for this society? That's a concern. And also, therefore, there was many people said there should be a role for civil society in this, particularly in the survey. There was a question on that. We didn't ask it in all the focus groups, but in the survey, I believe, I don't have the slide up, but I think it was 67% or something like that said there needs to be a role for civil society in that, because there needs to be eyes on what is being discussed. But part of what one would think of as an agenda is in negotiations and dialogue, you do have to open it up. So what does the government want to discuss? What would the armed people want to discuss too? Because the idea is to get at where the problems are. And that could range from what are the exit strategies? What if we want to lay down our weapons, what would that look like? What are you offering us? Anything? Or things like that. You'd have to build the agenda for dialogue when you get the people around the table, and ideally there'd be people who are neither government nor gang members supporting that process and bringing technical expertise into it.
Yeah, I think also what we're experiencing actually in Haiti, what we've been experiencing is it's almost like a man-made earthquake. So there's an opportunity for Haitian society to discuss, fundamentals, root issues also. The issue of using armed groups to gain power, to hold power, to bring down power is part of the dismantling of those groups. Um, why? And it's not something new. The use of armed groups. This is something that's been going on for years in Haiti, and it's not just after Duvalier left. Before, you know. So uh, the agenda for that dialogue is not just only about disarmament and demobilization, but it's also root causes of why this has happened, and how to stop this happening again in the future, in the near future, actually.
Yeah, that's interesting. So since we are on this, I mean, this phase where like people are asking questions about definitions of concept and in how we interpret those different the questions that are being asked. So there are two questions on the chat that also relates to that. I'm gonna ask them, and then maybe you can address them. The first one is more a concern about the framing of the question. How bothered are you when operation against armed group injure or kill innocent people? I mean, Mark Cerrone thinks that the framing of this question might be biased. So, because it frames security operation only through negative outcomes, and so the idea is that the question is framed in a way to have respondent answer with more like outrage. So again, that there's this concern about like the question neutrality. And also, Mark thinks that maybe having a follow up, I mean, asking the respondent if they still view operation as necessary would capture, a better measurement. That's the first question. I'm going to ask the second because it's kind of related also to methodology. So maybe we can just, answer those two questions and then move back to other questions. So the second question is anonymous from anonymous attendee. So that person is asking also is saying that it would be interesting if we can understand the plurality, diversity of the interviewer's background, to be able like to at least to know how representative those findings are, and especially considering the turbulent times and the extreme gang violence. So I don't know if you have comments about this, Laurie, and
Yeah.
we have.
Starting with the last one, I think we did talk about the background about interviewees. So again, we connected with people through survey, through focus groups, and through surveys, focus groups, and some key informant interviews. And there was a slide, I don't know if that person was there at the beginning, that talked a little bit about their background. And we do have more additional information that couldn't fit on the slides, more demographics, but it's a highly violence affected population. So it's not going broadly across Haitian society. We wanted to hear from people who were heavily affected, people in displaced persons camps, people living in neighborhoods that are controlled by or proximate to and subject to incursions from armed civilian groups. And so I'd say those who maybe are more distant from it to a certain extent would be those in the sectoral groups, but many of them have also, they may have lost loved ones or friends, they have been displaced themselves. So in the Port-au-Prince metro area, people are heavily affected, and that's the population we were interested in. In terms of framing of the question, so Mark's point there, it's an interesting one. I mean, defining collateral damage is a little bit about killing or injuring innocent civilians. We didn't introduce the idea of infrastructure into that as well. And yes, we did ask it in a way, how bothered are you? In Creole, because we did work in Creole, it might have been like, à qui niveau ça dérange, or to what extent does that bother you? And again, I didn't have time to introduce the definitions of each response. So there could be a weakness to that. I accept that. In terms of following up, and also, it's true, it was difficult for them to facilitate the feedback from the focus groups, is that it was difficult for people to keep all of that, a scale of 1 to 5 on a level of how much collateral damage bothers you. It's kind of not the greatest scale. I see the weaknesses in that. I still think what came out is that people, in talking about why, because again, about why they were saying this, that, or the other, was about, these security operations, when they're not effective, when they're not effectively targeting, when there's leaks and the people you're after leave and the civilian population is left exposed, that's a problem. And I think that's the key information out of that. In terms of following up in phase 2, we expect, given a change in the effectiveness of security operations, that people, and also what we're hearing back from facilitators, is that people they're supporting those security operations despite still collateral damage, but because they believe that there's a chance to try and break the back of this apparatus of armed civilian groups.
Good. Excellent. So we're moving like to a different theme, with the questions that are coming right now. So James Crowley is saying that it's, I mean, really interested. He's really interested in the point around crisis of leadership, that you mentioned earlier. So, and the question he's asking is, where might credible, acceptable, and also inspirational leadership come from in this context?
Well,
That's a tough question. That's a very tough
it,
question.
it, so it's both a short-term and a long-term issue. You have to be nurturing the kind of leadership that you would like to see in place on one hand, but that takes time. But also, you have to be able to open the space and be for natural leadership to come up. And the problem is that a lot of times we in Haiti live on a day-to-day basis. So it's a haphazard situation where the leadership shows up without the preparation for it. They've not prepared the team, they've not prepared themselves, and they find themselves suddenly in positions of power. And then that's when you realize that they're not really technically prepared for the positions that they're in, or they're not morally or spiritually or emotionally prepared. They don't have a team with them. They're bringing in people. So there has to be work on both sides, on both ends. The immediate allowing of new leadership to show up naturally by themselves, and also preparing deliberately new leadership that has worked on their internal issues and that have a team with them that they're accountable to. Accountability is an issue here in Haiti. the danger that I've seen because of the work that we've done, both Laurie and I, over the years, is that there is a leadership that's on that is sometimes when you speak to them and when you talk to them, you see that they know what they want, they know what they're doing, and they are armed and working, on violence based on violence. And I think there's a lot of people who just underestimate uh, those individuals. It's in moments of upheaval, violence, revolution that things come, leaders come from the underbelly of society, and you're surprised at a certain point to find yourself with a guy who, or with people who are smart, who are, who have a natural capacity to run a group, and are very angry. So that's a great danger, and there's work to be done there too, so that to channel this force in a different direction.
Yeah, I would just say, there's not a shortcut to national level leadership, but at all levels of society, positive leadership models. I think that's the thing. At every level, there's something in churches and schools and families. There's a need to insist upon positive leadership, and also perhaps again for those who have been working for social and political change in Haiti for a long time, but who have had a big mistrust of political parties and the political system, and that there's a line drawn between popular organizations, civil society organizations, and the political, that it will be necessary to have people of moral conviction, courage, and vision to wade into the political sphere, because you cannot, normally a democratic system requires a functioning political class structured in parties to
Mm.
be able to run a government. And Haitians, I think, want and deserve that, but it takes making it not always like the dirty thing. You have to clean it up, and it's going to be you to do it. So people with vision and conviction.
You just mentioned mistrust, and the next question that is coming is also about trust. I didn't make this up. It's literally a coincidence that the next question that is being asked by Rachel Limonta is, so cultural humility matters here, and it seems that the core of the issue, based on your presentation, but also based on the question, the answer that you just provided, is lack of trust and also transparency. And the question that Rachel is asking is, what efforts are being made, or in this case, that can be made also, to create or shift Haitian political culture toward greater agency and independence? Again, I'm just, reporting those questions. They are very
Wasn't
tough
Yeah.
really the
questions to
focus of the
answer.
data that we collected, so I won't have anything to really to say about that per se.
Well, I think that it's not just the political culture. There's a system in place that favors a certain type of individual to come to power. So that has to be analyzed. That has to be by the people of Haiti to see how to transform that. We've been involved over those past years also in preparing young people and seeing how young people would emerge from the neighborhoods and from other sectors of society and get engaged at the various levels, including the political level. But one of our fears is that they'd morph into what's in place now.
Mm,
So this is part of the discussion. This is part of the dialogue that has to happen in Haitian society. Why is it that we have the political class that we have now, the political culture, and what to do to transform both the individuals and the system that is in place? And it's not something that one person can have an answer for all of that. It has to be community led.
mm,
When I say community led, I'm not talking about grassroots community. I'm saying the whole of Haitian society led.
mm. That's good. Good. So, there's a question that is coming on the chat. It's about like, I'm gonna ask this question last because it relates to the work that you're doing and how they can support that work. This is a question that is asked by Sasha Filipova. So I'm gonna ask this question last because it relates to how they can provide support to you, and then I think it's fair to ask this question, before at the end of the Q&A session. So I'm gonna move to the next question, which is again asked by Rachel. Rachel is asking if there could be some kind of a comparison between gangs in Haiti, but also gangs in other countries like Brazil or maybe in the US, and if is there any help of consequences that are tied to gang in Haiti being classified as terrorist? I mean, is this something that you try to capture in the study, or is this something that you've come across while doing like this discussion?
First of all, each country has its own social matrix and it produces this kind of underbelly of criminality and the connection between criminality and politics, criminality and business. And you may find that countries that come from a background of slavery and they have an inheritance of a certain type of criminality also. And so each country has its nuances in terms of, and also the reasons why those gangs exist. um, so you can't, I don't think that you can actually there are some similarities, but there's a lot of differences. um, Being classified as terrorists, yeah, because what happens is that first of all, the communities are then hostage and are suffering, and there's a lot of difficulties to provide them with humanitarian help, humanitarian aid at this time, and or access to positions where you can actually speak and dialogue and negotiate with those that are being labeled as terrorists. So it's a danger for uh, people who want to transform the conflict and peace builders also. So you're actually pushing them into a corner where their only hope is to resist to the death. So I think that's some of the consequences of them being labeled terrorists, both for them that are inside the hoods and are doing the and are the actual terrorists, and those who want to help out and transform the situation.
Mm.
Yeah, I would say in the consultations, that last point that Louis-Henri made was the one that people raised. To what extent does that labeling, that designation, act as a constraint for dialogue to take place, for negotiations to take place, for humanitarian aid to be delivered? That was the concern that those that we consulted expressed.
And apparently, Wolf wants to answer something of that. Wolf, is there a question you wanted to answer?
No, I don't think he wanted to answer, but that's fine. If he does, I mean, maybe he can do like a little. All right. So I'm gonna move back to one question that I find very interesting. Um, Especially when we're dealing with data, sometimes data don't capture everything, and sometimes there are elements that we get, also while we and while we're rolling, survey research project. And so Nadej Robertson is saying that it's very interesting, and the work that you're doing is very interesting and relevant, and it's vital also like to advance on this kind of discussion. And she's also thanking you, like, for the work that you've been doing, both of you. And she's also asking you, after working on this survey for the last month, is there anything you observed, like heard, or maybe understood about the situation that was not reflected in the survey? And something that you, like, you noticed, you learned that the data unfortunately did not capture or did not reflect?
I would say maybe it's about deliberation in and of itself, that there's a tendency among Haitians, when you're asking them to analyze a problem or to discuss a challenge, to want to go to the root of it all and to go back to, to the founding before Haiti existed as a nation, to go back to those very deep root issues, which are still very much a part of what we're seeing today. And while that's very important, what we were also trying to propose was an approach to look at now this current situation, what we might do for some breakthrough, which does not exclude the idea of addressing those root issues, and to talk in a deliberative way about what trade-offs exist between different policies, that there is not, unfortunately, going to be a perfect solution. There will always be, you're going to be giving up something to get something in terms of a public policy or a way, an approach you're going to address something. And that this kind of thinking is something that I feel, is to be encouraged more, to come out with policies that grapple with the real constraints and challenges of implementing, and where so there can be more conversation within Haitian society. What are we willing to accept? How are we going to get out of this hole right now? With, for example, a judiciary that's not very functional. What do we have? What can we do? And that the importance of that there is something that can be done. And there is a lot of capacity that can be tapped into. And people don't need to wait for the perfect solution, that they can be engaging now to prepare the way for the next phase, which is going to come. It's going to come through people beginning to do it and not waiting for all of the preconditions to exist. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I would say also that data does not capture the depth of trauma that individuals and collective, communities are experiencing, and how that trauma is going to affect the future of the country if it's not transformed.
Mhm.
So you have both at the level of perpetrators and at the level of victims and at the level of Haitian society in general. We are accumulating trauma and it's being transmitted. And if we don't find a solution to it, if we don't transform our personal and collective trauma, we've just started in the violent circles that we want to break. If we have to break them, if we want to get out of these situations in the future.
Mm. Yeah, it's great that you mentioned this, because again, it's a second coincidence today, because like there was like someone in the chat, Mikhail Racine, was also asking if there was any discussion about around mental health and impact of this horrific crisis in the work that you did. It's great that you explained this at the end. So I think we have time only for two more questions. I'm gonna ask you two more questions and then we'll be done, because time is almost up. So the next question I'm going to ask is coming also from Rachel, and because she's curious to know how non-punitive approach can work within a culture that leans toward punishment itself. So, how do you think? Do you think that's possible, like to have non-punitive approach when actually the culture itself is leaning toward punishment?
One of the things that was said is that there's going to be a need to have preparation for any restorative justice approaches, and this will have to be discussed. It was a question raised: is this approach, is it going against current norms, where again there is, a punitive thrust? So one of the things that was also said is that it doesn't mean that working around restorative justice doesn't exclude the idea that there's some kind of consequences, and what do those consequences look like? And usually in a restorative justice approach, those things are defined by those who are there. What does justice look like to you? What would punishment look like to you? And you're involving people in that and allowing people to discuss the impact that all this had on them, why the whys that people need to dig to. So I think it's Rachel. I think that would be it's going to require exploration, and to see. And again, it's what we said about that as we were working with experts over this past weekend, preparing some inputs into phase 2 consultations, was that we're going to have to. Oh, I lost my train of thought about what the experts were saying about this. That we're going to have to um, dig toward we're going to have to start with people who are ready. So it's also, those who are ready to engage in a restorative justice approach will be those that are able to begin to engage in it, and we'll pilot with them and see where that goes. I say we collectively in the sector got to start where you can.
Mm.
Also, I believe that there is work to be done in rehumanizing uh, uh, each other. And once you have this connection with the other human being, and you've heard them, your attitude towards them is changes, and you may have a different approach to cleaning up whatever wrong has been done to you. Because now, instead of having just the devil in front of you, you see, well, that person is a human being, and how do we keep our relationship going now that we've built one? So it's a process that people have to go through, and there's people that are working already on transforming trauma in Haiti. Us, we systematically now introduce trauma healing in the processes that we're doing. There's others that are working on that, and we just have to multiply so that those kind of processes, so that the divides and conflicts that are based on the fact that we don't consider each other as human beings, whether we're dying of hunger or we think that we've been oppressed, and we are through the structures of violence in society, in Haitian society. Um, so the other person that's doing that, or the other group that we perceive as doing that, is not a group of humans. Um, so that dynamic we have to change also, so that we can move together towards the future. That's what I think.
All right, great. So I wanted to leave this question last because it could serve also as a final voice for you, because we're gonna transition to that. So I'm gonna ask this, and then you, Laurie, and Louis-Henri, you can transition to your final words for this presentation today, and then before we close the session. So Sasha Filipova, who's working for Institute for Justice and Democracy in Haiti, is asking also, what can advocates, lawyers, and other like policy actors outside of Haiti can do or be doing to support, constructive peace building process, but also to support your community work. So they are very interested in contributing constructively. So again, you can answer that and then move like directly to your final words, and then so we can finish. All right.
Thank you.
Louis-Henri, you want to start?
Yeah. Um, I think that one of the ways, if there's people that understand the need to do these activities in a consistent, deep way, that they make contact with us, and they hold us to these principles that we've outlined, and then to the work, and that we can move it uh, together, whether it's in Haiti or in the international community, because I believe that there's choices that the international community is going to have to do, and those choices are going to influence what happens in Haiti. So let's build this something together. That's the way I see it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would say in terms of, practitioners who are interested in supporting what's happening in Haiti, there's going to be a need to bring things to scale. It's going to be about, supporting with training, with lessons learned, what methodologies have worked either in Haiti already or in similar contexts, and making sure that we're gearing it up for the best chance of success possible. supporting with training and with processes that can begin to pilot and build out and come to a greater scale around issues of restorative justice, and also looking at how it will interact with more traditional punitive justice and issues that we didn't even talk about today, the judicial polls, the specialized judicial mechanisms that are wanting to come into existence in Haiti, but which are still going to be quite a long time before they're really online or even independent enough to function. So that's what I would say about that. I want to, as closing words, I would just really want to thank Haiti Policy House very much for this opportunity to have been able to share with you voices of those that we consulted. And we're going to be doing a second round to deepen the thinking around, particularly around the issues of restorative justice, around specialized judicial mechanisms, and also around one other topic, which is escaping my mind at the moment, around exit ramps for children and for adults in the absence currently of a CNDDR for adults, and with UNICEF and others who are working on certain mechanisms for children. So we'll be coming out with more data and presenting all of this, and hope that people can take these voices into account in their own actions.
Yeah, and thank you, Haiti Policy House, for setting this up, and we look forward to continuing these discussions, these debates, and moving on them and actually making them happen the way we believe it should happen.
All right, so we want to thank you, Louis-Henri and Laurie, also like for being part of this today. And again, like thank you for this wonderful presentation and the interaction with the audience. As we're closing, again, I want to thank everybody who joined today and to the first public release of IRAP survey findings. And as we mentioned, there will be more data that are coming. I think those data represent the voices and experiences of people directly affected by violence, and it is intended to inform ongoing policy discussion and with evidence rather than assumption. So we invite everybody to follow Haiti Policy House and IRAP. If you have more questions, you can follow them on social media. To stay informed also on additional data that will be released in the future. And again, a recording of today's webinar will be available also on YouTube, and the survey findings will be shared with all registered participants by emails.